Hello everyone, my name is Xiaoping Li and I'm a software engineer here at Sunrise Integration, and welcome back to part 3 of our React Native series. Now in this part, we're going to be exploring all the folders and files generated when we created our React Native project. After that, we're going to be exploring more about React Native components and how they're made. We're going to be viewing different types of components provided by React Native. Next up, we're going to be creating a little bit of styles onto our component. After that, finally, we are going to be adding our own font into our project. That's right. Now, before we get started here, if you guys watch part 2, I'm going to be doing a little test for you guys. Go ahead and get your React Native project running on your specific emulator, whether that's iOS and Android. So pause the video, go do that, and then I'll see you guys in a bit here. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look first of all at our folder and exactly what are all the files and folders. I'll be quickly going through each file, what they are, and some of them I will not be covering in depth in this video, like all the config files. So we'll be focusing solely on React Native, but let's just quickly go through what we have here. Our very first folder here is the test folder. Inside here, this is auto added when we initialize a project from the CLI. This is specific for the packages called React Test Render and Jest. So what this does is to test our app, make sure that it is being rendered correctly, and then Jest, on the other hand, is to test out different functions or different API calls and things like that to make sure that everything is running according to how we set it to run. So we're able to run all the scripts by using the command yarn test or npm test. Again, yarn is just another package manager similar to npm. So one question you may be asking me is, how do I know the command to run the test? Once we get into the package.json file, it will make more sense there. But let's go ahead and continue on. Next up, we have the Android and the iOS folder. These will basically have all our Android related files and folders. I won't be going into detail of what's inside of them in this series, but just so you know, Android is for Android related things and iOS is for iOS related things. Okay? And up next we have our Node modules folder. So this is probably one of the most important folders we have. This contains all our packages and dependencies for React Native. When I say packages and dependencies, what exactly do I mean? Well, let's go ahead and break it down. Packages are pre-written libraries that we're able to use without the need to do it from scratch. Dependencies are basically other packages that another package would use. They contain many different types of things we can use, like methods and classes, and so much more. Pre-written code that makes our life much easier. This folder basically contains all of that. When we install any new packages, it will go directly inside this folder. So let's go ahead and open it up. And wow, there are so many folders. Just know that these are all the packages and dependencies used. Crazy, right? There are so many. In the previous video, when we did the command npm install, this basically looked inside our package.json and package-log file and grabbed everything we need from the npm. React Native uses all these pre-written code in conjunction to create what we see and work with. It is pretty amazing, right? Alright, moving on. Next up, we have our .bug config file. Bug is basically a tool that allows for faster iterations when compiling and seeing changes quickly. Okay, moving on, we have the editor.config file here. This file is in charge of containing consistent coding styles between different IDEs should you switch. Okay, moving on down, we have the .flow. .flow is basically Facebook's flow. It's very similar to TypeScript. All it does is to check the correct formatting when dealing with types. Get attributes and get ignore, these deal with GitHub, and get ignore basically just ignores the file when we're pushing to a specific repo. Get attributes is what we do with those files that we do push. Okay. Next up, we have Watchman. Again, this is checks for changes and updates, so any custom configurations will go inside the Watchman config here. Moving on, we have our yarn.lock. So if we use yarn, you will have this file. If you use npm, you will not have this file, okay? Moving on down, we have the .eslint.rc.js here. This is just, again, another code formatter. This is just basically ESLint. So ESLint is a tool that basically helps us developers find issues with our code before it gets executed. So it's just a way to format and double check our code. And Prettier is the same thing. It just formats our code to add, like, for example, a single quotes. Instead of single quotes, we do double quotes and stuff like that. Bracket spacing. We can customize everything to our liking. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down to our next one, and that's app.js. App.js is basically one of the most important files we have in our project. This is the main file that's actually being rendered when we do run our app. When React Native compiles all our code, it will go ahead and take a look at this specific app.js and pull everything inside of there. Okay. Moving on down here, we have babel.config.js. Yet again, another config file. In this case, it is Babel. Remember, Babel is a tool that's in charge of converting our code into older versions of JavaScript. Okay. Next up, we have index.js. So index.js is our project starts, okay? It's the starting point of all our React Native applications. So if we quickly take a look inside, we can see that the app is registered here. Okay, moving on down, we have our Metro config file. Any custom configurations for Metro bundler can go within this file here. Okay, moving on down, we have our package.json file here. Here's where we can put our name, version, and set different types of configurations. As you can see earlier, I said we can do npm test or yarn test. As you can see under scripts here, we're able to run different types of scripts. We have our Android, iOS, start, test, and lint here. Next up, we have our dependencies here. These are just the dependencies, and we also have the development dependencies here listed below, and we also have Json. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up app.js here, and let's go and remove everything. Okay, and we will receive an error here, which is a good thing, as we can see that the fast refresh is actually working here. So let me just quickly go over what types of things are usually included within each different types of component. So inside our app.js here, usually what we generally have is we will always have imports on top of the file here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is import React here from React, like so. Again, React will handle all the JSX elements within our functional component. Again, we're just going to be dealing with functional components. We're not be dealing with class components, as functional components are more common nowadays. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and create our very first component here. So the naming here usually for each component will match exactly to the file name up here. As you can see, it's app.js, and our functional component in here is app as well. So we're going to do the equals our arrow function here, and just like so, we have our functional component here. And let's go ahead and export default our app as well. Okay. Now, as we take a look at the render area here, nothing was returned from the renderer. So again, we need every single functional component needs to return something as well. Okay, so we need to go ahead and return a JSX element. So this goes towards our next topic, which are the different types of components provided by React Native. Okay, so in our very first case, we're going to go ahead and deal with the view component here. So the view is very similar to like HTML divs. So again, we cannot just name it here and then not import it, right? So we need to go ahead and import that specific component from React Native as well. All right, as you can see, it's returning the white screen here on the iPhone 12, the emulator here, which is perfect because the view here is returning the appropriate JSX element, which is in this case a view. So next up, the next component I want to talk about is the text. So text, you probably guessed it, is our text here. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a little notch on the iPhone 12 here, right? And there's also our test is right up here, the text here. There is another component provided by React Native, which is our save area view. This takes into account of the notch up above here and adds the appropriate padding on top so that all our components will start off appropriately here to cover and push all the individual child components down. Okay, make sense? So for styling, we are able to do styles within the component itself like so. If we pass it inside the save area view here, we pass a prop, which is styles, which is the style here, and we can pass in different types of props, like background color. We name this to red, and as you can see, it's red. Okay? So then, one thing that I do want to go ahead and say is that passing props through the inline prop like so is not the best way to do it, because we are able to pass in errors, like for example, like so. So if there was a typo here, how would you know that it's properly being rendered right? So because we're passing it as an object, it's going to go ahead and accept it, and it's going to go ahead and try to figure out what it is, right? But right now it says background colors with an S inside of the C and the O here. So actually it doesn't do any checking when it's inline like so. So what is our solution to this? React Native provides a style sheet component where we're able to create our own style sheets that will indeed go through that check. And the most common place that style sheets will be is on the bottom of the functional component that we are exporting. So underneath it, we're going to go ahead and create a new const called style. And we're going to go ahead and call the style sheet.create. And we're going to pass in the object, which we're going to go ahead and create our style with. Okay, so again, this is very similar to CSS. So all we need to do is go ahead and create an object. So we want to name this object our container. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the background color of red here. This is the correct spelling. So if we were to try and put a S here, and we get an error here, it does the checking for us. It says background colors is not a valid style property. So that's one benefit of this, okay? So how do we actually pass it into our style here? Well, it's very simple. They're just objects. So we're going to pass it as an object to our style here. So we're going to go ahead and just call style.container. And boom, there you go. By creating style sheets like this, we're able to go ahead and number one is check that we're actually passing the correct properties to our style sheet. And in order to do our own custom fonts, we need to go ahead and find fonts in the first place, right? So you can just go to Google and find whatever font you may want. In our case, we're going to go ahead and do Roboto. So the very first step is to go ahead and create an asset folder, which will contain all our fonts. So go ahead and just create asset folder. Inside this asset folder, we're going to create another folder called fonts, like so, and choose whichever font you want and just drag and drop it inside the assets folder, like so. Okay, the very next step here, we need to create a new folder, a new file, sorry, called react.native.config.js. This will contain all our configs and all our assets. Okay, so what do we need to type in here? All we need to do is go ahead and do module.exports is equal to this object. To go ahead and put these in iOS, empty, and Android. We're going to go ahead and empty that one too. And lastly, we need to go ahead and now do our assets inside the parentheses here. And we need to basically set the appropriate URL to our fonts here. Okay, so we're just going to go inside here, find our assets, fonts, and it's going to go ahead and pull these and make sure that whenever React Native runs, it links appropriately to the correct fonts here. Okay, so we're not done just yet. we need to go ahead and manually link the fonts. So what we need to do is do npx react native and just type link. And just like that, we have our fonts linked to our application. So let's go ahead and run the emulator again. So the link command actually will link the fonts inside info.pls for iOS and create font directory, which is inside Android app, src, main assets, and fonts, where it will go ahead and copy your fonts onto those specific locations. Alright, we have our application running here again. So then let's go ahead and actually try to use our font, okay? So again, we have Roberto Black here. So we have our container here, which is for the safe area view. So let's create another style here for our text here. Our text style here. Okay, and then we can go ahead and pass our font family here. And the naming here needs to be exact here. So if we name it Roberto Black, very similar, exactly the same as our fonts inside of here, okay? And now again, we just pass the style into our style prop here. So text style, save. And as you can see, our font here changed. And it really is just that simple. We add the fonts into our assets folder, correctly link it with our react native.config, make sure that it's correct here. Go ahead and run the React Native link. After it links, it will copy the appropriate fonts to their specific Android folders in the iOS. After that, then all we need to do is just call the font family here and pass it into here, into our text here, and just like that, it's linked and ready to go. Alright, and then that's a wrap. I hope you guys learned a little bit more about different types of components as well as the folder structures, some styling, a little bit of fonts. So in this part, we only dwelled a little bit on the surface of how we are going to get started. In the next part, we're going to build out more components as well as go into more depth of how we can actually start styling all these different types of things and how we can actually put it together. Are you guys excited? The next part is going to be great. I'll see you guys there.